Before we begin, if you enjoy real-life stories told slowly and honestly, stay with me until the end and subscribe to the channel. These stories are for people who listen with their heart. I didn't know my life was ending when I unlocked the front door. I thought I was lucky. The conference in Portland wrapped up early, and all I wanted was a hot shower and my own bed. My heels were still on, my carry-on brushing my leg as I stepped inside the house we'd lived in for almost 8 years. It was too quiet. No TV, no music, just a soft, unfamiliar glow coming from the hallway. I set my bag down slowly. That's when I noticed his shoes by the door, neatly placed, but not where he usually left them. A small thing, the kind of detail you normally ignore. I told myself not to overthink it. I walked down the hall. The bedroom door was half open. I heard laughter. Not his normal laugh. This one was lighter, easier, like someone who wasn't carrying the weight of a shared life. I pushed the door open, and just like that, everything I believed in stopped making sense. My husband was sitting on our bed. He wasn't al- I didn't drive far. I couldn't. My hands were shaking so badly I missed the turn twice, then pulled into the first hotel I saw, a low building near the highway with flickering lights and a parking lot that smelled like rain and oil. It wasn't where I'd planned to be that night, but nothing about my life was where I'd planned anymore. The room was small, too small. The air smelled like old carpet and disinfectant. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my work clothes, and stared at the wall like it might explain what had just happened. My phone buzzed. A text. "Don't come back tonight. The locks are being changed. My lawyer will contact you." I read it twice, then once more. The man I had shared a bed with for years had just erased me from my own home in under 10 seconds. I didn't cry right away. I took off my shoes, lined them up by the wall like I still believed in order. I washed my face in the bathroom sink and looked at myself under harsh lighting. I looked older, smaller, but not broken. Not yet. Sometime after midnight, the tears finally came, quiet ones, the kind that don't make noise because your body is too tired to fight anymore. I cried for the life I thought I had, for the version of myself who believed love meant safety. I slept maybe an hour. Morning arrived without permission. I showered, dressed in the only clean clothes I had, and sat on the edge of the bed with a cup of terrible hotel coffee. My hands had stopped shaking. That scared me more than the tears had. Clarity was settling in. My phone rang. It was my assistant. I tried to sound normal. I failed. Within minutes, she knew everything. She didn't interrupt. She didn't offer advice I didn't ask for. She just said, "You're not staying there. I'm coming to get you." An hour later, she wrapped me in a hug that felt like permission to breathe again. At her place, I slept, really slept. When I woke up, something inside me had shifted. The panic was gone, the fog had lifted. I wasn't thinking about him anymore. I was thinking about what he didn't know, about the money I'd kept separate, about the documents he'd never bothered to read, about the woman I'd slowly made myself smaller for. That night, I opened a notebook and wrote one sentence. "He thinks I have nothing." I closed the book and turned off the light, because the truth was, I had more than he could ever imagine, and he was about to learn that the hard way. By the third day, the shock had worn off. What replaced it wasn't rage, it was focus. I moved through my assistant's apartment quietly, like a guest who didn't want to leave fingerprints. I borrowed clothes, made coffee, checked emails I'd ignored since that night. The world hadn't stopped just because mine had cracked open. Neither had I. His lawyer reached out first. polite, clinical, confident. The message was clear even between the lines. Sign quickly. Don't make this difficult. You'll walk away with less damage that way. I almost smiled. He had always underestimated silence. I didn't reply. Instead, I made an appointment with a lawyer I'd met years earlier at a finance conference. She specialized in complex separations, which was a clean way of saying she dealt with men who thought paperwork mattered more than truth. Her office was bright, minimal, calm. She didn't react when I told my story. She just listened, pen moving steadily across a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she looked up and asked one question. "Before we talk strategy, what do you want?" Not revenge, not punishment, just the truth on record. "I want what's mine," I said, "and I want to walk away clean." She nodded. Then we moved slowly, quietly, and we let him keep thinking he's ahead. That afternoon, I returned to the hotel parking lot, not to stay, but to sit in my car and breathe. I thought about the life I'd built before him, the work, the discipline, the decisions I'd made without asking permission. Somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten that woman. That night, another message came in. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Don't embarrass yourself." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I turned my phone face down and opened my notebook. Second sentence. "He believes this ends the way he wants." I capped the pen. Outside, the city hummed. People went to dinner, laughed, planned weekends. And in that ordinary noise, something extraordinary was happening. I wasn't falling apart. I was coming back together, piece by piece, quietly and on my own terms. And he still had no idea what was coming next. And just like that, everything I believed in stopped making sense. My husband was sitting on our bed. He wasn't alone. He didn't scramble to cover up, didn't panic, didn't even look ashamed. He just looked up at me, annoyed like I'd interrupted something inconvenient. "Well," he said calmly, "you're home early." The woman beside him froze. She wasn't young, but confident, comfortable, like she belonged there, in my bed. For a moment, my body went cold. Not fear, not anger, shock. "I want you out," I said, my voice barely steady. He stared at me, then sighed. "No," he said, "you need to leave." I let out a short laugh before I could stop myself. "This is my house." That's when he smiled, a slow, measured smile I'd never seen before. "Check the paperwork," he said casually. "My name's the one that matters." The room tilted. The walls felt further away than they should have been. The woman stood up, wrapping herself in the sheet, watching me like I was the problem. "I think it's best if you go," she said softly. Something inside me went very still. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I picked up my purse, the same one I'd carried through airports and meetings and dinners we used to call ours, and turned toward the door. As I walked out, I realized something terrifying and clear. The man I married wasn't standing in that room. A stranger was. And somewhere between the hallway and the front door, a quiet voice inside me whispered something I wasn't ready to say out loud yet. "This isn't over, not even close." That was the night everything broke, and the moment my real story began. The fourth morning felt different. Not lighter, just steadier. I woke before my alarm, stared at the ceiling for a long moment, and realized my chest didn't feel tight anymore. The fear had drained out overnight, leaving something sharper in its place. Resolve, maybe, or acceptance. Sometimes they feel the same. I started paying attention, not to memories, but to details. I asked my assistant to pull copies of old emails, expense reports, calendars, the little administrative things I'd once ignored because I trusted him to handle them. Trust, I was learning, is expensive when misplaced. Patterns started to appear. Trips that ran longer than necessary. Payments that didn't line up with invoices. Decisions he'd made alone, then explained afterward like they were already settled. I wasn't angry about it. Anger clouds vision. I wanted clarity. My lawyer called that afternoon. "I've reviewed the initial filing," she said. "It's aggressive. He's claiming the house, most of the liquid assets, and full control of anything tied to the business." I let that sit. "He's also painting you as uninvolved, emotionally distant, financially passive." I laughed once, softly. "Of course he is." "Do you have records?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "just not where he thinks to look." That night, I went back through old bank statements I'd saved years ago, back when I still believed preparation meant paranoia. Separate accounts, early investments, quiet decisions I'd made long before the marriage began. He had never asked. I had never offered. By midnight, I had 3 folders labeled by year and one growing sense of calm. The next day, he emailed again, short, sharp. By the end of the first week, everyone had an opinion. Friends I hadn't heard from in years suddenly reached out. Some were careful, some were curious, a few were quietly judgmental in the way people get when they're relieved it's happening to someone else. I didn't owe any of them explanations. I kept my circle small, my assistant, my lawyer, and myself. That was enough. The house was still off limits. Changed locks, new security code. He turned it into a fortress like walls could protect him from consequences. I didn't try to go back. Not yet. There was no rush. My lawyer and I met again, this time with documents spread across her conference table. I watched her eyebrows lift slightly as she read. "These predate the marriage," she said. "Yes. And this account? Mine. Always was." She leaned back and smiled, not a warm smile, but a satisfied one. That changes the entire tone of this case. I felt something loosen in my shoulders. For the first time, I wasn't reacting, I was directing. That afternoon, something else surfaced, an email thread my assistant uncovered while searching old archives, messages between him and a woman whose name I recognized too quickly. Office-related on the surface, too familiar underneath. Not explicit, but intimate enough to tell a story. This hadn't started recently. It never does. I didn't confront him. I documented. That night I dreamed of the house, not as it was, but empty, stripped down to walls and light. No furniture, no memories, just space. When I woke, I understood why. I wasn't fighting for a marriage anymore. I was reclaiming territory. The next morning, my lawyer called. "He's pushing for mediation," she said. "Quick settlement, no discovery." I smiled. Of course he is. Mediation favors whoever hides better. "We won't refuse," I said, "but we won't hurry." Silence on the other end. Then a quiet laugh. "I like how you think." Later that day, another message from him came through, less sharp this time, almost reasonable. "We can be adults about this. Let's not destroy each other." I read it once, then wrote the 4th sentence in my notebook. "He's starting to realize I'm not afraid." I closed the book. Outside, the sky was turning pink with sunset, the city slowing down for the evening. And for the first time since that night, I felt ahead. The tension didn't rise all at once. It crept in slowly, through unanswered questions, half-truths, and the way his messages kept changing tone. One day he was reasonable, the next threatening, then quiet again, like silence itself was a strategy. Mediation was scheduled for the following week. Neutral office, neutral language, neutral faces. Nothing about this was neutral. The night before, I sat alone at the kitchen table in my assistant's apartment, my notebook open in front of me. I reread every sentence I'd written since that first night. They told a story, not about him, about me, about how quickly I'd adapted once I stopped pretending everything was fine. That morning, I dressed carefully, not to impress, to remind myself who I was. Simple black dress, flat shoes, hair pulled back, no jewelry except my watch. Time mattered now. At mediation, he didn't look at me at first. He spoke through his lawyer like I wasn't in the room. It was almost funny how much effort it took for him not to see me. They opened with an offer. It was better than the first one, still not enough. My lawyer slid a folder across the table. Receipts, statements, dates. The mediator's expression changed, subtle but real. We took a break after that. In the hallway, he finally spoke to me directly. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "You could have just walked away." I looked at him for a long moment. "I did walk away," I said. "You just didn't notice." Back inside, the mood shifted. Questions were asked, clarifications requested. Time slowed. By the end of the session, nothing was resolved, but something important had changed. He no longer looked confident. He looked concerned. That night, I didn't celebrate. I didn't even talk much. I went back to the apartment, poured a glass of water, and stood by the window watching traffic move below like a steady pulse. Conflict has a strange rhythm. Once it peaks, it has to go somewhere. And I knew we were close. Before bed, I added another line to my notebook. He's losing control of the narrative. I slept deeply, because even unfinished battles feel different when you know the truth is finally louder than the lie. And the next part of this story was going to change everything. The twist didn't arrive loudly. There was no dramatic phone call, no courtroom ambush, no moment where everyone froze and stared. It came in an email, a single line from my lawyer that read, "We found something. Call me as soon as you can." I stepped outside onto the balcony before dialing, the city humming below me like nothing important was happening. The sky was gray, undecided. It felt fitting. She didn't waste time. "He's been moving money," she said. "Not recently, for a while." I closed my eyes. "Where?" I asked. "Accounts you weren't listed on, small transfers, consistent, clean enough to look like expenses if you weren't tracking patterns." I leaned against the railing, the metal cold through my sleeve. "So this wasn't panic," I said slowly. "This was preparation." "Yes." That word landed heavier than betrayal. Preparation means intent. It means he wasn't reacting to a broken marriage. He was planning an exit, quietly, carefully, while sleeping beside me, while letting me believe we were building something together. I thanked her and ended the call. For a long moment, I just stood there, letting the truth settle into my bones. This wasn't about an affair anymore. It was about erasure. That afternoon, I met my lawyer in person. She laid everything out: timelines, transaction trails, connections that only appeared once you knew where to look. "He assumed you wouldn't question it," she said, "or that you'd be too emotional to dig." I almost laughed. Instead, I nodded. "What do we do next?" Her answer was simple. We let him think he still has room to maneuver. That night, he texted, Mediation felt hostile. I don't want this to turn into a war. I stared at the screen. Then I typed back, I agree. Let's keep things respectful. It was the truth. Respectful doesn't mean unprotected. Over the next few days, I played my role well. Polite emails, flexible scheduling, calm responses. I let him believe his strategy was working, that I was tired, worn down, eager to finish. Behind the scenes, subpoenas moved forward, discovery widened, doors he didn't know existed were opening. One evening, while sorting through old files, I found a birthday card he'd written me years earlier. I don't know what I'd do without you. I set it aside because now I knew the answer. He would plan, he would take, he would leave, and soon he would understand what happens when you underestimate the woman who knows exactly how you think. That night, I wrote a new sentence in my notebook. I didn't need many words anymore. He planned his exit. So did I. Once you see intention, you can't unsee it. Everything made sense in a way that was almost insulting. The careful distance, the sudden confidence, the way he'd acted certain the outcome would bend in his favor. He wasn't brave. He was prepared, and preparation, I was learning, cuts both ways. Discovery moved faster after that. My lawyer didn't tell me every detail right away, only what I needed when I needed it. I trusted her. Trust, when earned, feels very different than trust given blindly. He started slipping, not dramatically, subtly. Emails sent too quickly, inconsistencies in explanations, a tone that shifted from calm to sharp when pressed just a little too hard. Pressure reveals seams. One afternoon, he called me directly, no lawyer, no buffer. "I don't like where this is going," he said. "That makes two of us," I replied. "This is turning into something bigger than it needs to be." I paused. "It became bigger when you decided to plan a life without me while still standing in mine." Silence. Then quieter. "I never meant to hurt you." That sentence used to matter to me. Now it felt like something people say when they realize consequences have teeth. We ended the call politely, almost gently. Afterward, I sat on the couch and stared at the wall, waiting for the emotional crash everyone talks about. It never came. Instead, there was a strange sense of alignment, like the truth and my instincts were finally speaking the same language. The mediation was rescheduled. This time, he arrived tense. His lawyer talked more than usual. The mediator asked sharper questions. I answered calmly, clearly, with documentation. Halfway through, his lawyer requested a break. In the hallway, I watched him pace, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and urgent. Fear looks different on different people. On him, it looked like irritation masquerading as confidence. Back in the room, the tone had changed. Offers shifted, conditions softened, language grew cautious. Not generous, just careful. That night, alone again, I poured a glass of water and sat by the window. The city lights blinked on one by one, steady and indifferent. I thought about how close I'd come to believing his version of me, the smaller one, the grateful one, the woman who would apologize for wanting fairness. I wasn't angry at her. She did the best she could with what she knew, but I wasn't her anymore. Before going to bed, I opened my notebook and wrote one more line, slower than the others. He thought silence meant weakness. He was wrong. I closed the book. The hardest part was over. What came next would be loud, but only on paper, and paper, unlike people, doesn't lie. The days leading up to the hearing felt unreal. Not rushed, just suspended, like time was holding its breath. My lawyer warned me this part would be uncomfortable. More documents, more questions, more moments where I'd have to sit across from a man who once knew how I took my coffee and now pretended he didn't know me at all. She was right, but discomfort isn't the same as fear. The first formal deposition happened on a Thursday morning. Neutral room, long table, water glasses no one touched. He arrived early, already seated, arms crossed like he was bracing for impact. When he saw me, his expression flickered, surprise, then calculation. I nodded politely and took my seat. The questions were methodical. Dates, accounts, transfers, decisions he'd signed off on without discussion. At first, he answered smoothly, confidently. Then the timeline narrowed, amounts repeated, patterns emerged. I watched it happen from across the table. The moment he realized this wasn't about memory anymore, it was about math. Numbers don't care how convincing you sound. His lawyer interrupted more often after that, asked for clarifications, tried to redirect. But once truth is laid out in sequence, it doesn't like to be rearranged. During a break, I stepped outside into the hallway. The building smelled like old carpet and stale coffee. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. I felt calm. That surprised me. I thought I'd feel vindicated or triumphant or angry all over again. Instead, I felt detached, like this was something I'd already outgrown. Back inside, the questioning resumed, this time about intent, about why certain accounts were never disclosed, about who benefited. He hesitated. That hesitation did more damage than any accusation could have. By the end of the day, his confidence was gone. Not shattered, just drained. As we packed up, he looked at me like he wanted to say something personal, something private. I didn't give him the chance. That night, I sat at my desk and reviewed everything one last time. The documents, the notes, the timeline that told the story better than emotions ever could. I realized then that the hardest part of betrayal isn't what you lose, it's what you stop believing. And I had stopped believing in the lie that I needed him to be okay. Before bed, I wrote again in my notebook. Fewer words now, cleaner. The truth doesn't rush. It waits until there's nowhere left to hide. I closed the notebook. Tomorrow, the story would stop being personal. Tomorrow, it would become public. And I was ready. Courtrooms don't feel dramatic when you're inside them. They feel quiet, heavy, like every sound matters more than it should. I sat at the table beside my lawyer, hands folded, spine straight. Across the room, he sat with his new attorney, someone younger, sharper, clearly briefed to clean up a mess that shouldn't have existed in the first place. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That told me everything. The judge entered. Formalities followed. Names spoken aloud that once belonged only to us now echoed off institutional walls. This wasn't about feelings anymore. It was about facts. My lawyer began slowly, calmly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She presented timelines, account histories, transfer records that showed intent without ever using the word. The judge listened. So did everyone else. When it was his turn, his lawyer argued context, stress, misunderstandings, poor communication. I almost smiled. Poor communication doesn't move money in perfect increments over multiple years. Then came the moment, an account I'd never been listed on, tied directly to assets he'd claimed didn't exist. The judge leaned forward. "Explain this," he said. Silence. Not the thoughtful kind, the trapped kind. My husband cleared his throat, glanced at his lawyer, then back at the judge. "I don't recall," he said. The judge didn't blink. You will, because the records do. From that moment on, the tone shifted, questions sharpened, patience thinned. What had been a negotiation quietly became an evaluation of credibility, and credibility, once cracked, doesn't repair itself. When court recessed for the day, I walked out into the hallway feeling lighter than I had in weeks, not because I was winning, but because the truth was finally standing where it belonged, out in the open. That night, I slept deeply, not with relief, with certainty. The ruling came 2 weeks later. No ceremony, no speeches, just a written decision delivered with the weight of finality. I read it alone at my kitchen table, line by line. Asset reallocation, restitution, full disclosure requirements. The language was precise, unemotional, and devastating. Everything he tried to protect was now exposed, redistributed, or tied up in consequences he could no longer outrun. When I reached the final page, I didn't cry. I closed the document and sat quietly for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic outside. I thought I'd feel victorious. Instead, I felt finished. Later that day, he sent one last message. I never thought it would end like this. I stared at the screen, then deleted it, because some conversations don't deserve a reply. That evening, I went for a long walk. The sky was soft with sunset, the air cool against my skin. People passed me laughing, arguing, living lives that had nothing to do with mine. I liked that. Back home, I opened my notebook for the last time. I didn't write a sentence. I just closed it. Some chapters don't need summaries. They just need endings. Life didn't suddenly feel magical. It felt manageable. I moved into a smaller place near the water, light-filled, quiet, mine. I chose furniture slowly, intentionally, nothing that reminded me of before. Friends asked how I was doing. "I'm okay," I said, and meant it. I met with a financial advisor, not because I needed one, but because I wanted control, clarity, structure that served me, not someone else. Together, we planned a future that didn't depend on anyone's approval. I started sleeping better, laughing more easily, trusting my instincts again. One afternoon, while organizing a drawer, I found an old photograph of us from years ago, smiling, unaware. I studied it for a moment, then put it back. Not out of sadness, out of respect for the woman I used to be. She didn't know what was coming, but she survived it anyway. I ran into him once more. A grocery store. Early evening, ordinary. He looked older, smaller, less certain of the space he took up. We exchanged polite nods, nothing more. As I walked away, I realized I felt no urge to look back. That told me more than any apology ever could. That night, I sat on my balcony and watched the lights on the water shift with the tide. I thought about everything I'd learned, that silence can be strategic, that preparation is power, that walking away doesn't mean losing. Sometimes it means choosing. People always ask the same question eventually. They lean in a little, lower their voice, and say, "Do you ever regret not fighting louder?" I usually smile when they ask that. Because what they're really asking is whether I wish I had screamed, broken things, dragged his name through the dirt, or made sure everyone knew exactly how much he hurt me. And the answer is no. I don't regret my silence. I learned something through all of this, something no one teaches you when you're young and hopeful and in love. Not every ending needs noise. Not every truth needs an audience, and not every victory looks like someone else losing publicly. Some victories are private. They live in quiet mornings where no one controls your time, in unlocked phones, in the absence of fear when a message comes in late at night. They live in the way your body finally relaxes when you stop pretending. After everything was done, I took a few weeks away from people, not to hide, but to listen. I walked along the water most mornings watching the tide come in and out without asking permission from anyone. I started noticing small things again, how coffee tastes better when you're not bracing for criticism, how sleep feels deeper when you're not waiting for disappointment, how peace doesn't arrive as a rush, but as a steady presence. I stopped replaying conversations in my head, stopped wondering what I should have said differently, stopped imagining alternate endings, because I finally understood something important. The version of me who stayed as long as she did wasn't weak. She was loyal. She was hopeful. She believed in commitment. And the version of me who left wasn't cruel. She was awake. I don't hate him. That surprises people too. Hate takes energy, and I spent enough of mine surviving the aftermath of loving someone who never planned to protect me. What I feel now is distance, the healthy kind, the kind that allows you to remember without reopening wounds. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the moment I stood in that doorway, the first crack in everything I thought was solid. I remember how small the world felt then, how narrow my future seemed, and I wish I could reach back through time and say one thing to that woman. You're not losing your life. You're getting it back. Because that's what this was. Not a collapse, a release. I didn't walk away empty-handed. I walked away clearer, stronger, unburdened. I learned to trust myself again, not the version of me that tried to hold everything together, but the one that knew when to let go. And now, when my home is quiet, it doesn't feel lonely. It feels earned. Some endings don't echo. They don't slam doors or leave scars you show the world. Some endings sound like a woman breathing out slowly, setting something heavy down, and walking forward without needing to explain herself. That's how my story ends. Not with revenge, not with bitterness, not even with triumph, but with peace. And that, I've learned, is the loudest freedom of all. If this story stayed with you, if any moment felt familiar, take a second to like this video so it can reach someone else who needs it. Subscribe to the channel for more calm, real-life inspired stories about strength, truth, and quiet resilience. Stories meant to be heard slowly, not rushed. And if you feel comfortable, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters more than you think. These stories don't end when the video does. So if you believe that silence can be powerful, that walking away can be brave, and that choosing yourself is never too late, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story.